The unit we'll be doing today is Unit 13, which is Equality and Diversity. My name's Shazia Khan, so anytime you want to ask any questions or anything, just holler. Today we'll be doing the Learning Outcome 1, which is to understand the key features of a culture which promotes equality and diversity. And when we talk about equality and diversity, what is the first thing that comes to mind?
Treating people the same.
Treating people the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Equality Act 2010.
Yeah, Equality Act 2020. When someone talks about equality, we look at things like it's used quite a lot in the UK. And do you think do you think there's a lot of issues with the term in regards to discrimination? And do you think within the UK, do you think there are places where there is lack of equality and diversity?
Yes.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay. Give me an example of something that you may feel that either you've seen or in your practice, if there's any sort of, equality and diversity that's been breached, or, where there's no form of promoting it.
I'm not sure if I can think of I'm not sure if I can think of an example off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, if within the, because we define it as society, within society, equality and diversity as being one of the, values of society. That's what my
Yeah.
expectation,
It
that
is,
it's
but
one of your, yeah, sorry, Adrian, it's one of your basic human rights, isn't it?
Yeah.
To be honest. And, we give everyone a chance to be a person they are, free from any sort of prejudice and discrimination, but it does exist, and that's why there are laws in place to protect against it. There's been instances where it's been, against age, against gender,
Disability.
Yeah, disability is a big one at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
where certain organizations don't provide the actual equipment or, services for people, with disability. And, SEND is a big thing, that's, being promoted quite a lot, because I've known institutions that don't provide the services for, and to be honest, I think it's one of the protected characteristics of, like you said, Patricia, the 2010 Act, which we'll look at. Oh God, what's going on there? So the 2010 Act, which actually looks at, protecting people from discrimination in the workplace, and protecting people from the wider society. And, equality is to ensure that everyone is actually treated lawfully and, equally, because it doesn't always happen. And it's disability, it's gender, it's age, I've seen lots of discrimination against age within, not the workplace I'm at the moment, within historical workplaces, where, people were discriminated on the basis of their age. And it does play a big role, because I think sometimes, whilst I've been teaching, you've had mature students, and they struggle to say that they want to become a barrister or a solicitor, and the reasoning behind it is, who's going to employ us at this age?
Yeah.
And it's quite, I mean, I would literally be the same as well. I think if I had to go for a job and a 25-year-old was there, or a 20-year-old, they'd rather pick that person over me.
Yeah, I kind of feel
Yeah.
a little bit I feel a little bit like that within my setting, because we're quite a small school.
Yeah.
And the people that because obviously I'm funding this course myself, but
Yeah.
the people that they've sort of funded for the last, however long I've been there, they've all been in their mid-20s. So, and I'm obviously quite a bit older than that. So I feel sometimes that they go for the younger model rather than the more experienced, mature person.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it still happens. And then obviously the pay between men and women. Generally, men
that's
still earn
always
more than
been a
money.
glass ceiling, hasn't it? Yeah, that's always been this glass ceiling, where you don't think you're always hitting the glass ceiling and you don't think you're getting any further. I've experienced that where I'm working, where, you know, I felt like that, you know, I was doing the same job as another male colleague, and I had to stop because I felt like I was giving more than I was getting, and the wage was still the same.
Yeah.
And his was a lot higher. So I just stopped. I had to put my foot down. Because I'm that kind of person, I tend to give, but not get anything back in return. And when I did approach someone, it was like, yeah, but you know, you're helping us out. But no, I'm not helping you out anymore, because I think it's quite unfair that I've done it for 6 months and not been paid anything for it.
You sound a little bit like myself. So
Yeah,
give, give, and then they
yeah.
take,
Yeah, and they don't ever give you anything back in, you know, for taking anything. You know, they just keep
No.
wanting more and more from you.
Yeah, I get that. I get that.
Sorry, Adrian, we're not trying to discriminate against you or anything. Don't worry.
No, I'm a white male, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. You know,
You are
I don't
allowed
want
to
you to
say what you want. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
No,
Safe
I'm only
space.
kidding. I'm only kidding. No, I totally agree with everything you say. I think I think my wife is in quite a senior position in her field, and I think I see her having to justify you know, herself so much compared to her male counterparts, you know.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's a good example, because you
Mm.
have to work a little bit more harder, don't you? And you feel
and
that as
everything
well.
gets scrutinized like so much more if it's an idea that comes from her. And I think than her male counterparts. And I think, you know, a lot of this is, I mean, it's so pervasive, isn't it? And it's so it's so inbuilt into society, you know. It's so hardwired, and I think you know, it's, you know, unfortunately it's progress happens, but it happens slowly, doesn't it? You know?
It changes a very slow process for lots of things, you know, and especially historically, you know, if you go back to the 70s and the 80s, you know, again, and you know, when were women given voting rights and things like that? You know, it was you know, it was always, women were always the back seat. And some organizations, and you'll be surprised, they still think like that. And their mentality, their mentality won't change. But the laws that come in place, like they prevent this anti-discrimination laws, and make it quite easy for people to have some form of protection. You know, and I think it's quite good that we have these laws in place to protect individuals against any form of discrimination, because, you know, it does occur. It doesn't matter what gender you are,
pregnant
what age.
woman, you know, that's a very common one. You know, it's it happens all the time, doesn't it?
What's that? Sorry, Adrian, what did you say?
I just said pregnant woman, you know, they also victims, you know, and it's you know, women just not being hired because if they're of a childbearing age, you know, they'll get passed over. So there's so many examples, isn't there?
And there's so many people out there that, you know, potentially can, you know, are so committed to their job, but, you know, it kind of, and that has kind of prevented women from getting pregnant because of their position in their job. You know, and a lot of women don't want to, you know, be that person that, you know, got pregnant and things. I mean, I've kind of heard comments where people have said that, you know, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean, you know, it's right to do this and that, you know. And it's sad, really, that we live in this society. So, you know, this act has protected us to not treat people unlawfully, even though I will say it still happens. It is one of the things that still happens. Like Patricia said, your age, your disability. Disability is quite a big one that plays a big role as well, you know. The fact that we need to abide by disability discrimination, but, you know, we need to provide services. We need to make sure we are not discriminating against person because of their age, their sex, their gender, you know, and these play a big role now within society. And it's so good that we've got laws in place to protect us. So again, who is protected? So you've got age, as we mentioned, gender. Gender reassignment's a big one at the moment, where people are not employed because of their gender reassignment, and which is quite unfair. Because, you know, it's what they are as a person, you know. They shouldn't be taken into consideration, because that's discrimination itself. Being married or in a civil partnership. Again, being pregnant, like you said, Adrian, is one of the things, or on maternity leave. Disability, race, including nationality, ethnic origin, or national origin. Your religion or your religious beliefs, which is quite a big one that people tend to, discriminate against. Sex and sexual orientation. And the religion one is quite a big one, because historically, there was quite a famous case where British Airways actually got sued for one of the air hostesses, where she'd actually wore a cross as part of her religion. And there was lots of abuse from the actual airline itself against this woman, because it was a piece of jewelry, but because it was her religious belief, she should be allowed to wear it. And they were taken to court on the basis of, breaching Article 9 of religious belief of the Human Rights Act, European Convention on Human Rights. So there's lots of cases out there where there has been a breach, and religion, I think, when I've worked in practice, plays a big part. Your religious beliefs, to wear what you want, to dress how you want, and not be discriminated against. I dealt with lots of cases from the Dewsbury side, where there were lots of young girls that were applying for schools, but due to the school not allowing the Islamic dress, it caused a lot of controversy.
Wow.
Because certain schools don't allow it. One of my friends is a barrister, and he only deals with the cases to do with the dress, religious dress. And he's really enjoying it, but he's saying there's so much cases, you'd be surprised, from schools. And it has its pros and cons, but we shouldn't be discriminating against anyone, because there's laws in place. And I think as individuals and as the younger generation, they don't tend to know about our human rights. But as an individual, putting aside our jobs, we have human rights, and we are, protected under the European Convention on Human Rights, and it's 47 countries are signatory to that. And, we are protected. And I think when I teach that, because I teach as government policy and we teach European Convention, the Human Rights Act, discrimination, a lot of students don't realise that they have their human rights. They don't know what they are. And that's quite disturbing, to be honest, because remember, you don't just, you go into the workplace, you work on the basis, you go into an organisation, you go purchase something, maybe you get in trouble with the police, and you've been arrested. You do have your human rights there to protect you. And the scary thing is, again, that a lot of people don't know. Quite an interesting, area to think about, because people don't really know that they have these rights when they go to these places. Because if just an example, if you are put in a cell in the police station, you are beaten up by a police officer because of something you've said to the police officer. There's instances where police officers have beaten up young boys, and that's the form of discrimination, in the fact that you've got your right to not be tortured whilst in detention. So, it overlaps with human rights, these Equality Act as well. And the fact that, you're protected as an individual. So You're protected from discrimination at work. What could be an example of discrimination at work?
Treating
Yeah.
treating children differently because of
Treating children.
yeah. So the students I work
That's in
with
that would be in education,
oh,
wouldn't
in
it?
work.
No, at work. Sorry, I'm just giving you just an example at work. What could be a form of discrimination at work?
Yeah, like trying to think. I mean, all the above.
It's been a long, it's a bit long day.
No,
so
it's okay. Don't worry. What if you are told that you've been sacked on the basis that you've done something? Constructive dismissal.
Yeah.
You've been sent home for no reason at all. Okay. They've given you no reason. Constructive dismissal. You've been bullied at work, harassment. So you're protected at work as well. Again, Patricia, you mentioned in education that you're treating children differently. Why? Why?
No, that would be a form of discrimination, wouldn't it? So,
yeah.
or favouring students over other students for whatever reason.
Yeah, it could be that, like you mentioned, treating children that have got a disability, less favourably. Discriminating against children with a disability.
Mm-hmm.
What about as a consumer? Gets your mind thinking, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As a consumer, how can you be discriminated as a consumer?
I think the obvious one that springs to mind is, I know in America, sort of the homosexuals that are getting civil partnered or married, they won't have their wedding cakes being made by a certain bakery or something like that. Based on that's one that springs to mind.
That's a good example, actually. Public services could be, for example, in the hospital where you've been discriminated against the fact that someone else is being seen before you, or you're discriminated on the basis of your gender. Again, that could be, someone who's trans that's gone into a hospital and being discriminated on the basis that they're trans. That happens a lot. With the form of discrimination within the NHS, it could be things like, when buying or renting a property, they discriminate against you if you are old or if you don't work. There's lots of discrimination in that instance. And then as a member of a guest or a club, it could be, for example, like a sports club, that they don't want you to come to the sports club because of your age. So there are different examples that you could use that would help you identify that, what form of discrimination and how it exists. And when it comes to doing your assignment session, it's always good to give examples, because it boosts up your marks, but also it will give the reader the idea that you know what you're talking about when you're talking about discrimination in a different form. So you're legally protected from discrimination by the Equality Act. And if you're associated with someone who's a protected characteristic, for example, a friend or a family, and you've complained or you've supported someone, you're able to, be there for that person as well and advise people. Sometimes we feel like, something's said, we kind of think about it later on, but it does amount to discrimination. So maybe, support others with it as well. We've got types of discrimination. So discrimination can come in different forms. And the most obvious one is the most obvious two, direct and indirect discrimination. So direct discrimination is treating someone with a protected characteristic less favorably than others. So that could be, again, age. It could be gender. Could be the sex. It could be disability. Why do we have these protected characteristics in place? Why do you think there's a need to have the protected characteristics?
Well, to avoid them being discriminated against based on these characteristics.
But do you think there's been, historically, do you think there's been a lot of cases maybe in them areas?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd say so,
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
otherwise they wouldn't have obviously introduced this piece of, big law and legislation regarding
Yeah.
this.
I mean, race is obviously a big one.
Yeah.
So there's been a lot of direct discrimination.
Yeah.
And then I think it's also got to influence the changes that are happening in society in terms of, like you said, transgender, and so it's got to obviously take into account, I think,
I think
society and the way it's changing.
As society changes, laws come into place to meet society's needs. And the reason behind, like recently there was the law that, if you have the law around, is it XL bullies, the dogs, to
Not sure.
kill them dogs. So why do you think
Yes.
there was a need for that to come in place?
Because too many people were being attacked by dogs.
Yeah. Not just attacked though. It was, you're right there, Adrian, but it was people were breeding them for the wrong reasons.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the whole point of it is you can still have an XL bully, but you can't, breed it. You've got to get all the operations done for it to not, be
right.
for that. So, there was lots of torture, animal torture as well. The facts that the dogs were being treated badly.
Well, they were bred because they were kind of breeding them to be aggressive.
Yes. And I think that's some of the reason behind it, the fact that, how they were being bred as well, and the fact that, they weren't good for society. So they want, even though the dogs may be timid and things, but they're just, the government. The other thing I was going to say, do you feel like the government, and I teach government policies, so I know, do you feel like the government makes laws in place to benefit the public, or do you think the government makes the laws to benefit themselves? There's two.
Both.
Both.
Say,
yes,
excellent,
Adrian, and I agree with you 100%. Both.
Probably more of the latter these days.
Yes,
to benefit themselves.
Yes, 100%. I agree with you, and you could see from the laws now, they've introduced just recently the fact that you can't use disposable vapes anymore.
Okay.
Yeah. Disposable vapes. You have to, if you've got a cat, you need to make sure, I think that's by September, that the cat has a tag on, gets tagged with your details on, because there's too many cats in RSPCA and, strays around. They introduced the law around, if you have your mobile phone whilst driving, the fine around that 3 points. You can't drive in flip-flops, sandals. Lots of laws in place that don't make sense to some people, but make sense to others, But sometimes, like you said, they favour themselves as well, because they have to benefit from it as well.
Occasionally they throw us a bone. Huh?
Yeah, occasionally, very occasionally.
Very occasionally.
Yes. And I think with the government we've had in place at the moment, can I just restart my internet? Just stay online 1 minute. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I've just got my monitor, my internet keeps going round and round. Sorry about that. So when we look at direct discrimination, it's looking at people being treated differently because of a protected characteristics. we've got indirect discrimination, and that's putting rules and arrangements in place that apply to everyone, but that puts someone in a protected characteristic as an unfair disadvantage. So treating, so they have rules in place for one person, but they may not have rules in place for the other person. That are unfair? How could that be unfair? And an example of indirect discrimination.
Would that be showing favoritism?
Yeah, that would be, but it's indirectly shown, so it's quite a big way. These are the main two forms, but then we've got also harassment. So that's things like, treating someone in a way that's undignified, subjecting them to behavior that creates an unpleasant and offensive environment. So it could be things like, bullying someone, someone's dignity. What else could it be? Because I mean, I've worked for an institution years ago, and there was at that time loads of cases of harassment. And the reasoning behind it, there was this one manager that was like a micromanaging, but he was also creating like an offensive kind of environment for women, and being quite derogatory, like in terms of what they wear, how they wear things. And it got to a point where actually she took him to the employment tribunal, left, because she was so stressed. And it wasn't just the one woman, it was quite a lot. And her doctors had to sign her off because she was mentally unfit to come back to work. So it got to a certain point where it was quite, the comments he used were quite derogatory, the harassment, giving her more hours of teaching, so, not the expectation, and there are still organizations out there that would do that. Victimization is another one, where treating someone unfairly because they've complained about discrimination or harassment. Do you think that happens a lot?
I think it probably does to a certain extent.
Yeah. So
definitely.
If you've complained about a manager, and that manager then obviously gets told off, would that manager then start treating you differently?
They could do.
Yeah. So, that is one that happens quite a lot. And, it can be lawful to have specific rules or arrangements and policies and things in place, but they must be justified so that it's not a form of discrimination. So, again, discrimination, and this is quite a good example, against your age, your disability, your colour, LGBTQP, trans. So it is quite a way of identifying discrimination, that it exists. 1.1, define the meanings of equality in diversity within the UK context. So definition: equality is the same status, rights and responsibilities for all the members of a society, group or family. So everyone should be treated equal. There should be equal opportunity for everyone. And, diversity actually is the next definition, which refers to recognizing people's values and valuing differences. Why is it important to recognize? Again, let's go back into Patricia, your job. Why is it so important for you to recognize that people are from a different social and economic ethical background, and why is it so important that we are diverse?
Well, my school is very diverse. We've got, lots of different disabilities, lots of different, cultures. And I think it's just, so working within the school environment that I do, I think it's just important that we promote these things, especially through RSC, which is what I've been doing for my teacher training hours.
Yeah.
So we obviously promote that, they can do, we're always promoting like positive, they can do anything regardless of, you know, their special needs,
Yeah.
you know, their age, their gender. So we're kind of constantly reinforcing that with them in some
And I think
sort of
that's really
way on a
good.
daily basis.
Yeah. That's really good because it gives that person a little bit of hope as well. But if you're helping them, but also getting them to recognize, you know, what they can and can't do, it just
Yeah, there's
identifies.
strengths and
Yeah,
limitations, which
yeah.
is what we
And
try and.
and sorry, what's that,
So
Adrian?
no, just sorry.
Yeah, don't know. Was Adrian saying something, Adrian?
We lost him.
We lost him. Oh, he's
No,
there.
I'm here. Sorry, I just
You went quiet for
broke
a
up a little
bit.
bit there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I am still here. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I think it's also about, by doing that, you're kind of preparing them
Can you
for
hear me all
life.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
So I think it's also important that we're doing this within the safe
Okay.
environment of the school,
Yeah.
rather than them kind of experience, you know, when they go out into the big wide world, when they leave, you know, our provision at 16 or 18.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
So
think diversity is so important, you know, to recognize people's background, recognize people's genders, accept people from different backgrounds and things, you know, and, you know, try to work together because it does help you actually become a better person and understand cultures. If you don't know certain things within a culture, it's best to ask.
yeah.
I used to teach FGM. Do you both know what FGM is? Female genital
Yep.
mutilation.
Yes.
And I had a woman in my class, and she was an 82-year-old law student. 82. She was excellent law student from Nigeria.
Fair play to her.
Yeah,
82.
82. Oh my God. Yeah.
Impressive.
Amazing.
Very impressive. And she did graduate as well.
That's amazing.
And she was from Nigeria, and I was talking about FGM as being an abuse, you know,
Well, it is,
because
isn't it?
yeah, it is, and we have made Bradford zero tolerance, and we've made Nottingham zero tolerance, because over 20,000 girls are sent every year from the
Wow.
UK, and it's a huge amount. You wouldn't think it's that much, but it is a huge amount. And every time I taught that, it was difficult because she'd had it performed on her, and her perception was that it was normal.
Yeah.
So for me to teach it as it being an abuse of power, abuse, it was really difficult. But I appreciated and understood her background, her ethical background, because she, from Nigeria, where she was from, it was a norm, even though in the UK and, you know, but as time and society changes, as times go on, you know, people will only see them. But I remember I struggled because she used to walk out of my class, and she'd always say, but it's not, but it's not. And I said, okay, then from your, you know, experience, I wouldn't disrespect your culture or anything like that. But in the UK, it's a criminal offence, you know. But it is really difficult sometimes to try to put yourself in their shoes, because, you know, it's one
And
of the
like you
things.
said, it's you know, that's, you know, culturally,
Yeah.
that's okay from where she's from. So
Yeah.
yeah, that must have been
I
really
always
difficult.
had to address to her that it was the fact that, you know, in the UK it's a criminal offence. It carries, you know, up to 15 years in prison, you know.
I
But
didn't know that.
yeah, it could carry, yeah, dependent on the severity of the actual offence. I mean, we had the FGM Act that was introduced in 2003. Since 2003, there's only been one case in 2017 where a woman tried to perform it, just recent, on her daughter. And she's
Wow.
sentenced to 3 years, yeah, on her 3-year-old daughter, I think. 3 or 4, like that, yeah.
3 or 4 years of age.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, I'm quite passionate about FGM and stuff like that, because I think if we don't spread the awareness about it, people don't know. people don't know about it, and you know, and teachers need to be taught it in schools as well, you know. And I think they are being. I think a lot of schools do it as well. So we're looking at defining the meanings of equality and diversity in the UK. So it's to advocate equality and diversity as part of, like I mentioned, our human rights. We're defining our values and to promote equality for every individual. So that there's no form of prejudice or, you know, any form of discrimination occurring within the workplace or within any sort of environment. How does equality and diversity relate to your setting? That's a question for Patricia and yourself, Adrian. How do you think equality and diversity relate to your setting, Patricia?
So I think, as I've already mentioned, we kind of promote it sort of on a daily basis without, you know, or we do have like, when it comes to different sort of like religious festivals, we'll do like an assembly on it, or we might, you know, learn about it in RSC, for example. So you kind of are doing it. So it's hard then to think of examples because it's just so ingrained. I don't know if you'd agree, Adrian, but it's so ingrained in what you do. So then to think of an example, it's then quite hard to do. So
I mean,
go on.
No, I was going to say I work in an all boys school, and it's 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 predominantly you know, majority white kids. And there is a big sort of we do have female students in sixth form. But there is a big sort of emphasis on you know, a lot of education about celebration of Pride Month and you know, Black History Month, which
we do those.
And I think there's, you know, and definitely, and I think I certainly, I mean, I look at my son and daughter, and they have such a different attitude to homosexuality than when I was at school. You know, it's not considered as much of a big deal as it was when when I was at school. So
it's
anyway.
good. It's good that in your, you know, where in your setting you actually, you know, promote it quite well, and, you know, use it as, you know, like we said, religious festivals, religious, you know, cultural celebrations. It's quite important because if someone doesn't understand, for example, when I'm teaching family law, I've got a couple of students that are white students, English students, and they struggle to understand the concept of an Islamic, when we talk about divorce and we talk about nikah, they don't know. So every time I bring something up, they're quite intrigued, and I love telling them about it. And then the questions start, but why, Shaz? But why this? Why that? So it's really, really interesting to get, you know, something across to them, and it's something new they learn, you know, and it's important, because if you don't explain certain concepts to them, they're not going to understand. There's no point teaching divorce and family law and a marriage, a civil partnership, or a nikah if you're not going to be able to identify the whole procedure around it.
I think also by, you know, promoting these kind of cultural and, you know, diverse ways, I think it's good because you're hoping, like you said, that, you know, when people don't know what things are, they you know, they ask questions. So I'm hoping that, you know, it kind of, I'm trying to think of the word. It kind of raises curiosity among them as well, that they will kind of be interested. So my class recently went to one of our colleagues is Jewish, so we went and looked at his place of worship, and it was actually quite interesting to see how they celebrate being Jewish. So hopefully it will, by, you know, doing these things with them, it will kind of arouses their curiosity.
And you know, I like for them to ask me questions about it, because if I'm able to explain to them and they're able to explain to another person, it just shows that they, intrigued but also interested as well. So it does play a big part in it if you start doing these cultural events. You know, you have codes of practice, you know, provide any sort of inclusion within, you know, a range of students all working together, you know, trying to prevent any forms of discrimination within like the workplace or within working with different students of different cultures, and it does help. 1.2, so analyze the benefits of promoting equality and diversity for individual learners. And, you know, we've got things like, you know, the code of practice, you know, to try and keep it a safe, supportive, stimulating learning environment, and a team of respectable, open-minded citizens. Good equality and diversity actually make the services far more accessible for everyone. How do you think the benefits, how do you think individual learners benefit from promoting equality and diversity? Do you think, like from your example, Patricia, because you've got students with a learning difficulty, do you think they get happy at learning about new things and people's cultures and, you know, Ramadan, and then you've got Eid and things like that?
I think it varies because, you know, their needs are quite diverse. So some would be more interested than others, I'd say.
Yeah.
But still, it's important because, as I said, when we're, you know, the whole point of us and our curriculum, which is, you know, quite personalised to our students, it's I think it's all part of preparing them, as I said, for life beyond 16. So if we haven't been trying to promote equality and diversity sort of on a daily basis with the work that we're doing with them, and then, you know, they step outside at 18 and then, you know, they get discriminated in whatever way it is. It's trying to help them be prepared for all eventualities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's right. Why would you have codes of practice in place, though? Why would you have that? Is it for the staff members to follow?
To avoid like and I think we've also got to consider unconscious bias, so that would hopefully mitigate that.
And it's a kind of rules and guidelines that we follow as an employee, but also, you know, things like that we need to promote and protect any sort of discrimination against anyone. So it's like rules that we put in place. So it's important to value the differences in staff and learners. And how do you do this? So, you know, if anyone wears any sort of religious clothing, you know.
One of my students wears a hijab. She's Muslim.
Yeah.
And she openly talks about her religion, which is good.
Oh, does she? Oh,
yeah.
And obviously language is another thing, you know, providing any sort of prayer rooms, you know, trying to make everything quite diverse, but translators, you know, specialist equipment, anyone where you'd have to cater for people with different needs. One-to-one sessions are good as well with people in regards to interventions or anything, you know, trying to make sure that diversity is impacted for the student, you know, that they've got a diverse way of thinking, that they accept every culture and they may not, but, you know, you can try and instill that into them, you know, try to help them and, you know, try to identify that people are from different cultures and different people are of different genders, people are of different ages, and we need to be more diverse in, you know, accepting people. And the benefits of that is that, you know, we try to promote inclusion. We try to make the learners and their family members feel valued and involved.
100%.
You know, if someone is not feeling involved, are we helping them? No. Are we? Will they feel excluded? Yeah. So we need to make sure that we promote some good sense of support for them and get them community cohesion and involved, promote a sense of open-mindedness and work towards reducing any sort of discrimination, be it age, be it disability, be it, you know, religion. We need to try and avoid that and try to accept people for who they are. And sometimes, like you said, people don't always accept it, but most of the time people want to learn about new cultures. Define legislation, employment regulations, codes of practice, 1.3, and the promotion of equality and valuing diversity. We've got the Equality Acts, and that looks at, protecting people from disability, religion, sexual orientation, and that's a big part now. Sexual orientation plays a big part within schools. And from your perspective, have you seen a change in schools in regard to sexual orientation?
Personally, no.
No, okay.
Because of the nature of my students.
Yeah. Sorry, Adrian, did you say you have? Yeah.
Yeah, we've had students, male students who've transitioned, and they've been wearing skirts at school and things like that, and it's actually I have to say they don't get any hassle from anybody.
That's really good. Yeah,
it's quite accepted, really. I mean, it's not. It's certainly it's not. It is quite rare, but definitely we had 1 year where there were 2 sixth form students who wanted to be identified as with female names, and which was fine, no big deal.
That's really good, because I think in some schools it would be difficult.
Yes, it would be very difficult.
Even though you may implement them policies and try to prevent any sort of discrimination, but when it comes to acceptance, not everyone will accept it.
No, I mean, I think this is quite an exception, not really the norm, and unfortunately, I think there would certainly be parts, specific areas where that just wouldn't happen, it wouldn't be tolerated, but hey,
and things like, how does it's true. Employment rules, maternity, as you said, codes of practice, wheelchair access, for students that have got disability, access to students that need Braille, teaching programs for students that have need support with English learning, and wheelchair access, lifts and ramps. And these are form of, if we don't provide something like that, then it would identify as being a form of discrimination. The Children's Act states that young children must be allowed to be healthy and remain safe in their environment, also to help them enjoy their lives. And it's an intervention to promote early intervention for actual children. What do you think the whole point of this act is?
Is it to try to give children a more sort of equal footing and start in life?
It always looks at the framework of Every Child Matters. That's the really important framework, and the program that's been used is that they need to support every child, from birth to the age of 19, and it aims to reduce the Every Child Matter number of children who experience any sort of educational failure, any sort of antisocial behaviour, that suffer from any sort of ill health, or any sort of young teenage parents as well. So it is really important, this framework of Every Child Matters, and it's like we said, there's 5 concepts: to be healthy, to stay safe, to enjoy and achieve, and to make a positive contribution, and to achieve economic well-being. Do you use this framework where you work, in your setting?
I would say yes, because we're doing it again, either consciously or unconsciously. A lot of it again is through RSC. They do PE, they have extra, they have after school clubs, they have loads of different sporting events, different sports to try and engage with as many of the students as you can. We try and help them learn about money and things, so we do lots of community outings and shops, and really I think all of it, and then as well about being healthy and being able to enjoy and achieve and make a positive contribution. a lot of the students, well, there's some students in our school that will come to school and they haven't eaten. So straight away, they're not going to want to. I'm just thinking of Maslow's hierarchy. Then their basic needs haven't been met for whatever reason. So they're not going to be able to then progress and, you know, be ready for learning. So we actually set up a breakfast club so students can come, have the breakfast, and then be set up for the day. So I think we do all of that in different ways at my school.
And that's part of one of the 5 elements, your positive contribution to try to get that child involved, but also to try to, you know, provide for that child. So you are, you know, an organization that provides services for children and to obviously ensure that, you know, they are safeguarded.
Absolutely.
It's so important, you know, because there's organizations out there that don't really provide these services. And it's so nice to hear from both of you to say that, you know, the organizations you work with promote diversity and include equality quite, you know, favorably, but also provide takes in on board the framework of, you know, every child matters, because that's really a big concept that was introduced in 2004, and it was enforced by the 2004 Children's Act, because there were some areas that needed to be improved. Healthy, so how does it implement Children's Act? Like you've mentioned, again, you mentioned the breakfast clubs, free school meals, reception, healthy school meals, which is really good, access cards, visitors monitor, breakfast club, which, like you said, you know, some children, some parents, because of the cost of living, can't afford, you know, breakfast. And it sounds like, you know, we're trying to make excuses, but because of the issues around with the cost of living, you know, parents cannot afford sometimes to give breakfast
again,
to their
being
children.
able to provide them opportunities in other ways, like after school clubs or, you know, even, you know, trips that we organise as a school to take them to various places. They might not get those opportunities otherwise for various reasons. One of them, obviously, for a lot of people is financial. So
it is. And after COVID, I'm sure both of you have seen the differences from COVID up till now, where families are struggling financially, but also, you know, to provide for their children. And it's really, really upsetting.
It's really sad.
It is really sad, honestly. I've heard people, you know, I remember one person that came in the newspaper where she was a mother and she had no money for electric and gas for a couple of days, and she sent her children every morning to school and to have breakfast and stuff. And then they came back one day and she died because it was so cold in the flat.
It's awful.
It is. It's just, I think, and we don't, and I think the government don't see the impact it's having, you know, on not just children, but, you know, parents as well.
You know, often, you know, you hear of stories where, you know, the parents are really struggling with money and they don't eat because obviously they're trying to provide for their kids. It's heartbreaking.
It's really sad. It's really heartbreaking. And we're so lucky that we've got food banks to help people as well, the ones that really need it. The Special Educational Needs and Disability Act, also known as SENDA, is an act that was introduced by Parliament to introduce thinking students in pre and post-16 education. And it was there to prevent treatment of individuals in provision for goods and services, but it's also there to the right for disabled students not to be discriminated against. Do you think that happens, though? Do you think this act, there was a need to introduce this act because children, disabled people were being discriminated because of their disability? What do you think? Do you think people, young disabled children, anyone that's disabled was being discriminated because of their disability?
It obviously was to obviously, because obviously for you know, an act or a piece of legislation or law, there's obviously going to be a lot of evidence to support that. So
there was lots of implications where, the Act provided, things like you said, educational services, field trips, examinations, libraries, and things like, learning resources for disabled children. So there was a need for this Act because there was a need for reform to be made. How is this implemented? And that's like things through one-to-one care, support staff, planning appropriate physical activities, like you said, PE, and intervention sessions and facilities for disabled children. So we finish off with looking at, if a disabled child is, disadvantaged, then these, the laws are in place to anticipate and protect these vulnerable students and children as well. And that's why the laws are in place. So, equality and diversity actually plays a big part in both teaching and the outside world in the workplace as well. And, people need to bear in mind that we have policies and procedures in place to protect that. So we've finished Learning Outcome 1 now, okay? And we looked at the Equality Act. What is equality diversity? The benefits of promoting equality and diversity for individual learners, and the legislation and codes of practice and the laws in place for equality and diversity. And some of the references we've used are here. Has anyone, both Adrian and forgot Patricia, have you got any questions? I forgot, I just went blank. Have you got any questions before we finish this session?
I'm okay at the moment, thank you.
I'm fine actually.
Are you sure?
Yeah, that was really interesting actually.
Oh, I'm glad you found it interesting.
And can I just say, so I think it's nice, because the sessions I've had up until it's just been me and like another tutor, so it's nice to be able to obviously hear from you, Shazia, and you, Adrian, as well, just to kind of make it more of a discussion.
Yeah, I feel like, for me, I think
rather than just because you get sick of the sound of your own voice sometimes, don't you? Otherwise,
I don't want to be giving you death by PowerPoint. So I think the discussion, my students learn with discussion because I think it stays more in your head. And it stays in there when you've discussed it a little bit more. And contribution from you two is really good because I think we can work together and trying to, help get to the final bit of it, the assignment, and it'll be easier for you then.
I hope so.
Yeah.
But that's towards the last session. I think the next session is not next week. It's the week after.
I was just going to check that with you. Is there a reason?
It's half term, isn't it?
Oh, okay. So, have you got young people that you need to?
I haven't, but I have a board meeting with the domestic violence organisation. It's quite an important meeting. So
I was just I did notice that on the schedule, so I was going to just
I think it's next week off, then you're back the week after, and then we'll do Learning Outcome 2. Is that okay?
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Nice to meet both of you, and it's been lovely to meet you. You too. So and take care.
Do I go ahead now? Sorry, just before we go, I just have one question. So do I can effectively, from what we've done now, I can go and sit down and start Unit 1. Is that correct?
Unit 1. This is
Unit 13. Unit 13, Learning Objective 1.
Learning Outcome 1. Have you been given the assignment?
I think it's on. I think you can see it on Moodle. Have you found it on Moodle, Adrian?
You know what? I know I can find it. I just don't have it in front of me at the moment.
It's definitely on Moodle.
Yeah. Sorry to ask such an elementary question, but it was just the case. Is the idea that I now take this information and I go and apply it to that?
Yes, but we'll do that more towards the end, okay? So don't worry about that, but have a read of it.
Oops. Okay.
Sorry, I've stopped sharing that, and I'll just stop this. So we've finished the session now, but just stay online and I'll just see which one.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for attending the session as well today.
Thank you.
Just stop.